Cold wind swept across the downtown street as people hurried past the marble building of National City Bank. It was a place of crisp suits, polished shoes, and money that smelled like power. So when a girl in a torn hoodie, with matted hair and worn-out sneakers, pushed through the revolving glass doors, the entire lobby froze for a second. Then came the whispers, the smirks, the quiet laughter. The security guard, a bulky man named Johnson, stepped forward immediately. "Miss, this is private property," he said firmly. "You can't loiter here." "I'm not loitering," the girl replied, her voice soft but steady. "I need to access my account." Her name was Emily Hayes, though almost no one in the city would have recognized it. Years of sleeping under bridges, washing in public fountains, and eating whatever she could find had erased the memory of who she used to be. She clutched a crumpled envelope in one hand, her knuckles white with cold and determination. Johnson frowned. "You have an account here?" He scanned her from head to toe. "You sure about that?" A few people waiting in line turned their heads. A well-dressed woman whispered to her husband, "She's probably here to beg." The husband chuckled, shaking his head. "Or rob the place with that look." Laughter echoed quietly. Emily ignored them. She walked toward the counter where a young teller named Maya sat, trying not to stare. "Hi," Emily said, placing her envelope on the desk. "I'd like to make a withdrawal." Maya hesitated before opening the envelope. Inside was an old certificate of deposit, faded but legible, stamped with the bank's seal. The sum printed on it made her eyes widen slightly, but she quickly regained her composure. "This account hasn't been accessed in 15 years, Maya said carefully. "Do you have identification?" Emily nodded and handed over a small weathered ID card. The photo was old, but the resemblance was clear. Maya frowned. "This says Emily Hayes?" "Yes," Emily replied quietly. "That's me." Just then, a man in a grey suit with a shiny gold nameplate that read Mr. Reed. Branch manager noticed the scene and approached. "What seems to be the issue here?" he asked in his smooth, condescending tone. "She's claiming to have an old deposit account," Maya explained, showing him the certificate. Reed took one look at Emily and smirked. "This has to be a joke," he said loudly enough for others to hear. "Look at her. Does she look like someone who could afford a bank account, let alone a deposit?" People laughed again. One man muttered, "Maybe she found that paper in a dumpster." Another snorted, "Or printed it at a library." Emily's jaw tightened, but she didn't flinch. "You can verify the account," she said evenly. "It's still under my name," Reed scoffed. "Fine, let's entertain this fairy tale," he motioned to Maya. "Run it in the system." Maya hesitated but began typing the account number into her terminal. The room fell silent except for the soft tapping of keys. Seconds passed. Then the monitor beeped. Maya froze, staring at the screen in disbelief. Her mouth parted slightly as she read the figures displayed. "Well," Reed demanded, "what's it say?" Maya swallowed hard. "Sir, this account holds $412 million. The entire room went dead silent. The laughter, the whispers, everything stopped. Even the ticking of the lobby clock seemed louder now. Reed blinked rapidly, thinking he'd misheard. "What did you just say?" $412 million, Maya repeated softly. "And the account is very much active." Reed's face turned pale. His earlier arrogance dissolved into nervous stammering. That can't be right. There must be some error in the system." Maya shook her head. "No, sir, it's verified. The certificate matches the record, and her ID confirms ownership." Emily reached out and retrieved her document calmly. "I told you it was mine," she said, her voice even but carrying a quiet power that silenced the room further. The customers who had mocked her moments earlier stared in disbelief. One woman who had laughed clutched her handbag tighter, as if realizing how wrong she'd been. The man in the navy suit tried to look busy on his phone. Reed's tone changed instantly. "Miss Hayes, please forgive our misunderstanding. Allow me to escort you to my private office. We'll ensure your needs are handled discreetly." Emily looked at him for a long moment, her gaze sharp but calm. "I think I've already seen how you handle people," she said softly. "No need for privacy." She turned toward the door. The guard stepped aside quickly this time, bowing his head slightly. Everyone in the lobby followed her with their eyes as she walked out into the cold afternoon sunlight, her shadow stretching long across the marble steps. No one knew that the so-called homeless girl they had ridiculed was the silent majority shareholder of National City Bank. Her fortune, inherited from her late grandfather, had been locked away for years under legal guardianship, until today. Emily wasn't here for money. She was here to see something far more valuable, people's true faces when they thought she had nothing. As the doors closed behind her, the bank employees exchanged uneasy glances. For them, it was just a strange incident. For Emily, it was the opening move of something much bigger, something that would shake their world before the week was over. When Emily stepped back into the busy city streets, the chill in the air felt sharper, but so did her purpose. She pulled her hood tighter as she crossed toward a small cafe across the street. No one there recognized her either, which was exactly what she wanted. The city had forgotten Emily Hayes, the granddaughter of one of the country's greatest financiers, Charles Hayes. But she hadn't forgotten the city, or the people who once took everything from her family. Inside the cafe, she sat near the window, her reflection blending with the moving crowd outside. She opened her tattered notebook, the same one she'd carried for years, its pages full of plans, lists, and one recurring name, National City Bank. That bank wasn't just any institution. It had been her grandfather's creation, a symbol of honesty and fairness until greed changed everything. 15 years earlier, after her parents' fatal accident, Emily had been sent to a guardian, her father's business partner, Richard Reed. The same Reed whose brother now ran the downtown branch. Richard had promised to protect her inheritance until she turned 25. Instead, he sold properties, transferred assets, and buried her name in paperwork. When she questioned him, he sent her away to a boarding school abroad, where funds mysteriously ran out within a year. From there, her life spiraled downward into survival, until now. As she sipped her coffee, her phone buzzed. A message appeared from a number saved as Oliver. Legal. Transfer complete. You now control 62% of National City Bank shares. Press release scheduled for noon tomorrow. Emily smiled faintly. Perfect, she murmured. Meanwhile, back at the bank, the entire staff was still whispering about the homeless billionaire. Mr. Reed had locked himself in his office, pacing, his shirt collar unbuttoned. Maya had tried to speak with him, but he'd waved her away. Do you realize what this means? He muttered to himself. If that was the Emily Hayes, she owns us. He quickly picked up the phone and dialed his brother. Richard, we have a situation, he said. She's back. There was silence on the other end, then a low curse. How much does she know? Enough to walk in here and humiliate me, Reed hissed. The account is active, 400 million. If she really is the majority shareholder, we're finished. Richard exhaled slowly. Listen to me carefully. Keep her away from corporate headquarters. I'll handle the rest. When the call ended, Mr. Reed slumped in his chair, sweat beading on his forehead. He suddenly remembered how the girl's eyes had looked, not frightened, but calculating. He knew she'd be back. That night, Emily returned to the shelter where she had spent her last few months. The place smelled of damp wood and disinfectant, but the people there were kind. A little girl named Rosa ran up to her as soon as she entered. Emmy, you got your papers today? She asked with excitement. Emily smiled. Yes, sweetie. And soon, you won't have to sleep on the floor anymore. Rosa tilted her head. What do you mean? Emily knelt, brushing a strand of hair from the child's face. It means things are going to change. For all of us. Later that evening, she sat on her bunk, reading old news articles she had collected. One headline caught her attention. Hayes' legacy transferred to Reed Holdings. It was the moment her family's empire had been stolen under legal pretense. Every dollar she'd fought to reclaim represented justice, not revenge. But tomorrow, that justice would be public. The next morning dawned cold and grey. By 10 a.m., newspapers across the city buzzed with headlines. Mystery investor acquires National City Bank majority stake. No one knew the buyer's identity yet. Inside the bank, panic brewed. Mr. Reed barked orders, called emergency meetings, and demanded answers. His phone rang off the hook with calls from headquarters. By noon, the news broke. A press release hit every major outlet. Emily Hayes returns as majority shareholder of National City Bank, announces new initiative for social reform and poverty relief. The staff in the downtown branch stared at the screens in disbelief. Mr. Reed's face turned ghostly white. Maya covered her mouth. It's her, she whispered. The woman from yesterday. Minutes later, the bank doors opened again. Emily walked in. No hoodie this time, no torn clothes. She wore a simple black coat, her hair neatly tied, her expression calm but commanding. The same guard, Johnson, immediately straightened and saluted awkwardly. Ma'am. he said softly. Mr. Reed came rushing out of his office, stammering, "Miss Hayes!" I didn't know." "You didn't care to know," Emily interrupted coldly. "You judged me based on appearance. You mocked me in front of strangers. And now, those same people will answer to me." Every eye in the lobby was on her. Cameras from local media had already begun flashing through the glass doors. Emily turned toward Maya. "You were the only one who treated me with decency," she said. "From today, you're promoted to branch director." Maya gasped. "Ma'am, I don't know what to say. Say you'll run this branch." "With kindness," Emily replied. "Something it's been missing." Then, turning back to Reed, her voice hardened. "And as for you, clear out your desk. You're finished." The crowd erupted in murmurs. Reed's face twisted with disbelief. "You can't." "I can," Emily said firmly. "And I just did." She walked out of the bank again, the sunlight reflecting off the glass doors behind her. Her reflection, this time, wasn't that of a homeless girl. It was of a woman who had reclaimed her legacy. But as she stepped into her car, her phone buzzed once more. A message flashed from an unknown number. "We know what you did, Emily. You took back what's ours. Now we're coming for you." Her smile faded. The past wasn't done with her yet. That night, the city skyline shimmered like glass under moonlight, but Emily's thoughts were far from peaceful. She sat in the back of her sleek black car, scrolling through the threatening message again and again. "We know what you did, Emily. You took back what's ours. Now, we're coming for you." There was no signature, but she didn't need one. She knew exactly who it was. Richard Reed. Her old guardian, her family's betrayer. "Mom, should I inform security?" Her driver, Daniel, asked, glancing at her through the rearview mirror. Emily shook her head. "No, let him come. It's time the Reeds learn I'm not that helpless girl anymore." Still, she tightened her coat as they pulled up to her temporary apartment, a modest penthouse she'd quietly purchased under a new name months earlier. She stepped inside, the city lights pouring through the glass walls. Her assistant, Oliver, was already there, sitting at the table with his laptop open and several folders spread out. "You saw the press response?" he asked. "You're trending everywhere. People are calling you the billionaire who walked in with torn shoes." Emily smirked. "Let them talk. The story serves its purpose. But we've got bigger problems." She slid her phone across the table, showing him the message. Oliver's smile faded. "So he's already making a move?" "Yes," Emily said quietly. "Richard's not going to let go easily. He's still controlling the board at Reed Holdings. That company runs a dozen shell firms under National City Bank's umbrella. He'll fight to keep his influence." Oliver leaned back, crossing his arms. "What's your next step?" "Expose him," Emily said. Completely, she opened one of the folders. Inside were old documents, bank statements, offshore transfers, and letters forged in her name. "These prove he used my trust fund to finance his own ventures. If this goes public, he's finished." Oliver hesitated. "Emily, if you leak this, it won't just ruin him. It'll start a corporate war. Investors will panic." Emily's gaze was firm. "Then let them. I'm done letting men like him profit off silence." Before Oliver could respond, the power flickered. Once, twice, then darkness. Emily's instincts sharpened instantly. "Stay still," she whispered. Her training from years on the streets had taught her when danger was near. She could feel it now, the prickle of being watched. A second later, the glass door to the balcony creaked open. Emily motioned for Oliver to stay down. Quietly, she reached for the drawer under the table and pulled out a small revolver, one she'd kept since the day a stranger tried to rob her under a bridge. The city had hardened her in ways no school ever could. A shadow moved outside. Then a tall man in a black coat stepped in. His face was hidden, but the voice was unmistakable. "You've made quite a mess, Emily." "Richard," she said, leveling the gun. "I was expecting your lawyers, not you," he chuckled, stepping forward slowly. "When it comes to billions, my dear, I prefer handling matters personally." Oliver stood up, phone in hand. "One move and I call security." Richard smiled. "You think security will save you? Half the board still answers to me. The moment your little stunt hit the news, I had every reason to take back control." Emily didn't flinch. "You mean steal again?" He stopped in front of her, eyes cold. "That money was wasted on your family. I built that empire. I kept the lights on while you played runaway princess." "You built it on lies," Emily shot back. "On stolen trust funds, falsified signatures, and dead names." Richard's smirk vanished. "You don't understand power, Emily. You think owning shares makes you untouchable? Tomorrow, when the market opens, you'll see just how fragile your empire is." She tilted her head. "Then why the warning text? Sounds like a desperate man." For a moment his face twitched, just slightly. Then he stepped closer. "Desperation is for those who have nothing left to lose. I still own the board." Emily's tone turned icy. Not for long. Right then, the door burst open. Two men in suits stormed in, private security, alerted by Oliver's silent panic button. They tackled Richard before he could react, pinning him against the wall. "You'll regret this," he hissed, struggling. "This isn't over." Emily walked up to him, lowering her gun. "Oh, I know," she said softly. "It's just beginning." The guards dragged Richard out as sirens wailed in the distance. Emily stood still for a moment, her heart pounding, not from fear, but from adrenaline. She turned to Oliver. "Get the files ready. Tomorrow morning, I'm calling a press conference." Oliver nodded, his eyes wide with respect. "And what will you tell them?" "The truth," she said, staring out at the glittering skyline. "How greed destroyed my family, and how I'm taking it all back." Outside, the city lights blinked like stars, unaware that before sunrise, the name Emily Hayes would send shockwaves through the financial world. But in the shadowed alley across the street, another figure watched from a black SUV, phone pressed to his ear. "She's moving faster than we thought," he murmured. A voice on the other end replied coldly, "Then accelerate our plan. Emily Hayes can't be allowed to survive this battle." The SUV drove away into the darkness, its taillights fading like blood-red eyes in the night. Morning sunlight spilled across the city skyline like fire as Emily stood before the mirror, adjusting the silver pin on her blazer. There was no trace of the girl in torn shoes now. The woman reflected in the glass looked sharp, calm, and unshakably confident, but behind her eyes the storm was still raging. Today was the day she would destroy the Reeds once and for all. "Press conference starts in 30 minutes, Oliver said, stepping into the room, tablet in hand. "Reporters from every major outlet are waiting. The board is furious. They've been calling non-stop." Emily turned. "Good. Let them sweat. It's about time the truth saw daylight." Downstairs, the lobby of National City Bank was a sea of flashing cameras and murmuring journalists. Some remembered her as the mysterious homeless billionaire, others as the woman who had dethroned a corrupt dynasty overnight. But none of them knew the full story. Yet. As she stepped up to the podium, microphones clicked on. The flashbulbs flared like lightning. Emily took a breath and began. 15 years ago, she said, her voice carrying through the room, "my family's legacy was stolen by men who called themselves guardians. They took everything, our name, our wealth, our dignity, and left me to vanish." Whispers rippled through the crowd. Oliver stood behind her, holding the folder of evidence. "But I survived," she continued, "and I learned that sometimes you have to lose everything to see who you really are. The man responsible for that theft, Richard Reed, used my trust fund to build his empire. He controlled this bank, manipulated investors, and ruined families. I have the proof right here." She lifted the folder, revealing hundreds of pages, financial records, forged documents, hidden offshore accounts. The journalists surged forward. Cameras zoomed in. "Today," Emily said firmly, "that ends. Effective immediately, Richard Reed and his affiliates are stripped of all control over National City Bank. Their assets will be frozen pending investigation. And this institution, my grandfather's creation, will return to what it was meant to be, a place for people, not predators." The room erupted. Reporters shouted questions, flashes blinded her, but Emily didn't flinch. She'd waited years for this moment. Then, as she stepped off the stage, a voice boomed through the chaos. "You think you've won, Emily." Richard Reed was there, hands cuffed, escorted by 2 police officers. His face was bruised, but his smirk was intact. "You can strip my name from the company, but you'll never clean the blood from your hands. You think they'll follow you, a street rat in designer clothes?" The crowd gasped. Emily turned, meeting his eyes. "You're right about one thing," she said. "I was a street rat, and I learned more on those streets than you ever did in your penthouse. People follow truth, Richard, not titles." She nodded to the officers. "Take him away." As he was dragged past her, he leaned close enough to whisper, "You think this is over? You've made enemies you can't even see." Emily didn't respond. She simply watched as the doors closed behind him, ending an era of corruption. That evening, she sat on the rooftop garden of her building, watching the sun sink into gold and crimson. The wind tugged at her hair as Oliver joined her with a tablet. "The market's stabilized," he reported. "Your speech changed everything. Investors are calling it a new age of integrity. And the board, they just voted you as chairwoman. Emily smiled faintly, but her expression remained thoughtful. It's strange, she said softly. For years I dreamed of revenge. Now that I've got justice, it doesn't feel like victory, just peace. Oliver nodded. Sometimes peace is the best kind of win. They sat in silence for a moment, the city humming below them. Then Emily's phone buzzed again, an unknown number. She opened the message. Congratulations, Miss Hayes. You took down one Reed, but there are more where he came from. Her heart skipped once. It's not over, she whispered. Oliver looked at her, frowning. Another threat? She locked the screen. Let them come. I've lived with nothing before. I can survive anything again. The stars began to pierce through the dusk as the city lights flickered alive. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed faintly, a reminder that power always attracts shadows. But for the first time in years, Emily Hayes felt no fear. She walked to the edge of the rooftop and looked out at the horizon, the world she had reclaimed. The same city that had mocked her when she was invisible now whispered her name like a legend. She had come to the bank as a homeless girl and left it as a symbol of resilience. The laughter that once followed her had turned into applause. The cold marble floors that had rejected her feet now bore her initials engraved in gold, E.H. Foundation, restoring hope to the forgotten. Emily smiled faintly, the wind carrying her voice as she whispered to the night. For every person they ignored, for every dream they broke, I'll rebuild it all. The stars above glimmered like silent witnesses to her vow. The battle was over, but the mission had just begun, and in the shadows of the financial world, a new war stirred quietly, one that would test just how much power a woman who once had nothing could wield when she finally had everything.